Welcome to a new episode of Out from the Horrorbox. In this episode, we're going to go over the movie Bob Weinstein said was going to reinvent the werewolf genre. This film went through development hell, reshoots, and changes to the plot, re-edits to give a PG-13 rating rather than the original intended R rating, and the firing of veteran makeup artist Rick Baker to replace the werewolves he had created with computer-generated ones. This is the 2005 werewolf horror comedy film directed by Wes Craven and written by screenwriter Kevin Williamson. This film is Cursed.
Ellie, watch out! Help me! Are you okay?
Do you hear that? What's going on up there?
Ever since the other night, things are happening. Things I can't explain.
Ellie, what's wrong?
Just having a really bad day.
Can I help?
Last night, a young woman was attacked and killed.
Hey, buddy, you okay?
What was that?
It's my dog.
What kind of dog do you have?
I have a regular dog.
Something's wrong.
The only way you can break the curse is to kill the person who started it all. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I needed to talk to you.
On a seaside pier in Los Angeles, friends Jenny and Becky decide to get their fortune told by Zila. Zila foretells that they will suffer a horrible fate, warning about a beast that feeds off the moon, but they don't believe her. That same night, 16-year-old high schooler Jimmy Myers has a run-in with some bullies, particularly Bo. Bo is dating Jimmy's crush, Brooke. Jimmy is picked up on Mulholland Drive by his older sister Ellie, who has just returned from visiting her boyfriend, Jake Taylor. Driving home, Jimmy and Ellie collide with an animal and another car. They attempt to rescue the other driver, Becky, but an unseen creature slashes the siblings before it drags Becky off and rips her in half. When interviewed by police, despite Jimmy's belief that it was a wolf or a dog-type animal, the official report credits it to a bear or cougar. The next day at work, Ellie finds herself attracted to the scent of a co-worker's blood, but she dismisses it. At a party, Jenny interrupts a conversation between Ellie and Jake, annoyed that Jenny is flirting with Jake. Ellie leaves the party early. Soon after this, Jenny heads down to the parking garage where she is chased and killed by a wolf-like creature. Jimmy does research about wolves in California and starts to believe that the creature was a werewolf, sharing his thoughts with a disbelieving Ellie. To ease Jimmy's concerns, she touches a silver picture frame without getting burned. Jimmy is becoming much stronger and more aggressive, as shown when Bo coerces him to join the wrestling team. He easily defeats 3 wrestlers, including Bo, and calls Bo out for constantly making gay jokes towards him, saying that Bo himself is repressing his own homosexuality. Ellie starts to believe the werewolf hypothesis when she meets Zila. Zila warns about the effect the coming full moon will have and tells her that the only way to cure herself is to end the line of the werewolf who cursed her. Jimmy proves that they have been cursed when he holds a silver cake server and gets burned. Discovering that the picture frame Ellie touched earlier was only stainless steel, the siblings' dog Zipper, who has become increasingly afraid of his owners, bites Jimmy, becoming infected with the curse, and goes on a rampage. Realizing what's happening, Jimmy goes to warn Ellie with Bo, who showed up at their house to confess that he is gay and has feelings for Jimmy. Bo is flatly rejected by Jimmy, who believes the attraction to be his werewolf pheromones, but Bo still helps Jimmy. Ellie has deduced that Jake is a werewolf, and he confirms it. However, he reveals that he didn't attack her and Jimmy, as he was born a werewolf and can control his transformations. When another werewolf attacks the two, Bo and Jimmy try to help, but Bo is knocked out. The werewolf turns back into Joni, who was cursed after a one-night stand with Jake and committed all of the previous murders. She now wants to kill all potential rivals, so Jake will be hers. When Jake offers to let Joni kill him to protect Ellie, she refuses as she knows killing him would break her curse. After knocking him out, she turns into her werewolf form and starts attacking Ellie and Jimmy. The siblings fight her, and when the police arrive, the two draw her out by insulting her. The police open fire, eventually killing her when a policeman shoots her in the head. Bo is okay, but Jake has disappeared. Jimmy and Ellie return to a wrecked home. As Jimmy works to restore the power, the siblings begin transforming. Jake arrives, revealing that he caused Joni's curse. The only way to cure Ellie is to kill him. He wants to be with her, but also kill Jimmy so only he is the alpha male. She and Jake fight, but he dominates the fight. Werewolf Jimmy joins in, climbing across the ceiling and biting Jake, allowing Ellie to stab and badly injure Jake with a silver cake server. Ellie decapitates Jake with a shovel and breaks the curse on the two siblings and Zipper. They watch as Jake's body bursts into flames. Bo, Brooke, and Zipper arrive at the house. Bo and Jimmy are now friends. Jimmy kisses Brooke and walks her home along with Bo. Ellie is stuck with the cleanup of the messy house. To start off our trip through development hell, let's start with the cast for this film. Casting for this film is ridiculous. Before Bob Weinstein stepped in and had Craven reshoot and rewrite the script, the overall cast was much different. The first of the three leads to be cast was 19-year-old Jesse Eisenberg, star of the critically acclaimed indie Roger Dodger, who was announced on March 3rd, 2003. It was also reported that Christina Anapow and Judy Greer had joined the cast in supporting roles. On March 13, 2003, it was reported that Christina Ricci had signed on to play the leading role of Allie Harper, an associate producer on The Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn, who was attacked by a werewolf after a car accident on Mulholland Drive. The same day, Scott Foley and Omar Epps were also cast as Allie's boyfriend, Kyle, and the chief of the Animal Control Department, Ben Taft, respectively. On March 17, 2003, Skeet Ulrich, who had previously starred in Craven's Scream as Billy Loomis, joined the cast as Vince Winston, the burnt-out son of a millionaire who gets bitten and cursed by the beast. Other cast members include Milo Ventimiglia, Bo, a high school bully, James Brolin, Tyler Winston, Vince's billionaire and estranged father, Shannon Elizabeth, Becky Morton, a party girl who gets brutally murdered under Santa Monica Pier, Elena Douglas, Zila, an atypical fortune teller, and Robert Forrester as Detective Harzel. Scott Baio played himself, along with Corey Feldman. Pop singer and actress Mandy Moore was cast as Jenny Taylor, the opening victim who gets killed by the werewolf during a costume party sponsored by PETA. A Nightmare on Elm Street star Heather Langenkamp joined the cast in a small supporting role as a TV reporter, and John C. McGinley took part in the production as Jimmy's abusive dad. James Callahan and Michelle Krusik rounded out the main cast as Allie's co-workers Mark and Debbie. When production shut down and resumed with the new script, new roles were added and others were rewritten. Skeet Ulrich was unsatisfied with his character's transformation and chose to drop out of the film. On December 1st, 2003, Joshua Jackson was cast as a new male lead, renamed Jack and retooled as Allie's boyfriend, along with Portia de Rossi, who replaced Alana Douglas as Zila. Smallville regular Michael Rosenbaum, taking over as James Callahan as Allie's assistant, now named Kyle, and R&B singer Maya as Jenny, previously played by Mandy Moore. Lance Bass of NSYNC joined the cast in a cameo appearance as himself. Scott Foley was originally supposed to reprise the role of Kyle, now turned into Ellie's assistant, but ultimately dropped out, as well as James Brolin, Robert Forster, Corey Feldman, Omar Epps, Heather Langenkamp, and John C. McGinley were all written out from the new version of the script and couldn't reprise their roles. The first draft of the script was written by Kevin Williamson in August 2000 and followed the exploits of a New York City serial killer who discovers that his lethal tendencies are due to his lycanthrope nature. Both screenwriters Sean Hood and Tony Gayton did rewrites of Williamson's original script during the development process. Dimension Films co-writer Bob Weinstein announced in October 2002 that Curse would reinvent the werewolf genre, and Wes Craven would direct, with the movie being officially released on August 8, 2003. Craven was in the final stages of pre-production with the movie Pulse when Weinstein abruptly pulled that movie from the schedule 10 days before shooting and cut through all the slow lanes, getting Cursed off and running. Craven was reportedly not pleased, so Weinstein doubled his pay in order for him to do the werewolf film. The director deemed the script too tonally similar to his film Vampire in Brooklyn, but felt pressured by the studio, leading him to ultimately signing on. Per Weinstein, Wes and Kevin are a dynamic team, and we are confident that their collaboration will prove to be a winner. In December 2002, a press release for the project described Curse as a modern, hip twist on the classic werewolf tale, and Dimension Films also announced that Academy Award winner makeup effects designer Rick Baker would be in charge of the overall design of the werewolves. Principal photography was supposed to start on January 27th in order to meet the already locked August 8, 2003 release date, but delays in pre-production forced Dimension Films to push the start date back to mid-March. On late January, a new release date was therefore announced and set on February 4, 2004. With a budget of $35 million, Curse commenced shooting on March 17, 2003 in Los Angeles on a scheduled 15-week shoot. The set used for the high school is Torrance High School, the same used for Sunnydale High on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and West Beverly High on Beverly Hills 90210. Filming also occurred at Verdugo Hills High School for the scenes involving Jimmy Myers, Jesse Eisenberg's character. Mandy Moore's opening scene was shot over a 2-night period on the roof of the Bel Age Hotel in Hollywood. Singer Sheila E. appeared in the scene as herself, playing with her band at the costume ball for PETA. The car accident was shot on Mulholland Drive, and some interiors were built inside the LA Center studios. More scenes were filmed at the Santa Monica Pier in Hollywood Boulevard. Entertainment Tonight did interviews with Ulrich and Ritchie when the original version was being filmed. Their report included behind-the-scenes footage, like Ulrich's character Vince walking near the pier at night, another scene in the same location showing him jumping down on the beach and landing on all fours, a scene where he and Ritchie's character Ellie are running out of her house, and another scene after that one where they jump down to the streets. All of these scenes were part of the original script. In early June 2003, after 54 days of filming and with only 4 weeks left to shoot the final confrontation at the Hollywood Wax Museum, Dimension Films decided to put the movie on hold because top executives at the company weren't happy with the film's ending or how the special effects were progressing, specifically the look of the lead werewolf. Editor Patrick Lussier, a frequent collaborator of Craven's, had just finished working on reshoots of Darkness Falls when he was brought in to work on Cursed. It was nearing the end of its principal photography, and according to Lussier, the unfinished version of the film ran about 90 minutes long, and the only thing that it was missing besides the ending was the score and the visual effects. The movie was put back into development, during which all parties discussed on the final outcome. Several options were considered, including shooting the final confrontation as it was originally written, or transform the script into something different, saving as much film footage as possible. One alternative was to turn the character of Jesse Eisenberg and John C. McGinley into werewolf hunters. Ultimately, the screenplay went under a major rewrite that turned Ellie and Jimmy into estranged siblings and morphed Vince into Ellie's mysterious boyfriend, Jake. From those 90 minutes, the new version only included about 12 minutes of the original footage. After a tentative September restart, the movie officially went back into production on November 17th, 2003. This did, however, create a meta inconsistency with the story. Ellie works among the crew of The Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn. Kilborn made a cameo appearance with Scott Baio. Scott Baio himself. Kilborn had left the show, The Late Late Show, a few months after shooting Wrapped in August 2004, before the film's release, and was replaced by Craig Ferguson. On January 17, 2004, the extensive reshoot wrapped. The new ending of the film was much more emotional and tragic, and featured Jackson's character begging his girlfriend Ellie to kill him to end the curse. An article about the film in Fangoria number 241 included pictures of a head prop for Jake's original death scene. From all versions of the film which were tested and screened to audiences, including the original version, which was never test screened, this one scored the highest, but Dimension Films was dissatisfied with it and demanded a new one. Actor Jesse Eisenberg, who, along with Christina Ricci, was one of the few actors to work in all the different versions, stated, "The crazy part is that after we filmed the whole second version of the film, we had to go back for a third reshoot, which lasted about 20 days. That's like the length of an independent movie. And then we had to go back a fourth time for like 10 days, and they made shirts that said, 'Cursed 4, back for more.'" The new ending depicted Jake as the main villain, willing to kill both Ellie and Jimmy. According to Patrick Lussier, the final budget for the film was close to $90 to $100 million. In the final round of reshoots, werewolf actor Derek Mears improvised the infamous shot of the werewolf flipping off Ellie and Jimmy during rehearsal with Craven. Scott Nimfero, who was at one point brought in during reshoots to script new scenes, including an opening sequence of the werewolf jumping through the Hollywood sign that was scrapped due to budget limits. In 2014, Judy Greer spoke of the film in an interview. "I don't know why that movie got so fucked up. I don't understand it. I thought the script was fine. Honest to God, I didn't get the big deal. I don't know who kept making them fuck with it. Then we shot the movie for like 7 years. I think they said we had 4 movies worth of footage. It was so fun, but so weird. I don't get it. I couldn't figure it out." In 2018, Christina Ricci also spoke briefly about the film in an interview. "It was one of those video movies that got horribly screwed up." In 2019, Jesse Eisenberg gave his thoughts about the troubled production of the film. "The first movie was more interesting and provocative. I don't know why it wasn't working. Now that we know the behind the scenes of the Weinstein Company, it makes sense as to why it was so chaotic." About the troubled production, he said, "They filmed 90% of the bigger budget version. The first movie was this very splashy thing. The second version was definitely cutting corners in a lot of different ways. And the plot? I thought it was so stupid. I thought the plot was so cliche. They made us brother and sister. The things that they kept from the original film were little snippets, like a car rolling down a hill. They kept that shot." In July 2021, Brian Collins from the Screamfest blog did a review and comparison between the final film and both the Craven's original unfinished cut and first reshot version, which were surfaced from VHS work prints, and both versions were praised as superior to the final film. This is not the first time when news about an alternate version of Curse existing were reported. Some years ago, when he was asked by fans about the film, Patrick Lussier mentioned how he still has copies of 3 unreleased versions of the film: Craven's unfinished cut, first reshot version, and finally the uncut reshot version with all the deleted gore and practical effects by KNB from before most of their work was cut as well. And in October 2018, former Dimension COO Carrie Blanett confirmed that all original and deleted footage from Curse still exists. Okay, so now we're going to go over the original script that they were shooting with at the time that production started. This comes from the website Horror Syndicate, and I give all credit to the writer, Seth T. Miller, for his research into finding the script that the team was using at the time. I'd also like to note, this is from the website Horror Syndicate from Miller. In his research of the original version, several sources have been consistent in stating that Christina Ricci's character had originally been named Ellie Hudson prior to the decision to make her and Jesse Eisenberg's character siblings. However, according to the revised shooting draft that I read, labeled Second White Revision, that he reread, this was for April 7th, 2003. Her full name was listed as Ellie Harper. The script begins at the rooftop party for endangered species sponsored by PETA. Here, a young woman named Jenny Taylor, dressed as a leopard, talks to a mysterious man dressed as a wolf. The mysterious masked figure claims to be a werewolf, and Jenny plays along, believing that they are flirting. Jenny becomes terrified as the conversation gets weird, with the man dressed as a wolf informing her that he's going to stalk her, and eventually kill her, and even detailing how he's going to do it. Creeped out, Jenny leaves the man at the party. In the parking garage, as she approaches her car, she becomes frightened by strange animal-like noises and notices someone lurking in the shadows. She chases the figure away, but when she makes an effort to return to her vehicle, she notices the wolf costume neatly folded on the hood of another vehicle. She is suddenly attacked and mauled in the parking garage, torn apart by the beast. Later, on the freeway, a cloaked figure drives Jenny's Honda Civic with Jenny's corpse in the passenger seat so that they can use the carpool lane. The vehicle heads towards Hollywood. The script then moves on to the three leads: Vince Winston, Ellie Harper, and Jimmy Myers, all of whom strike out in the romance department. Vince, the son of a wealthy business owner, is intoxicated at a nightclub and fails to pick up a girl named Becky after incorrectly guessing her name. Ellie, a career woman working for the Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn, meets her pretentious boyfriend Kyle Cole at a restaurant, only to be informed that he's dumping her after he insults her character and states that she's bad in the sack. Teenager Jimmy intentionally lets his golden retriever Zipper off the leash to stage an encounter with his crush Brooke, who works at a wax museum. But this doesn't work in his favor, as she barely recognizes him and her dickhead boyfriend Beau arrives to pick her up. Vince leaves the nightclub in his Mercedes, still intoxicated and driving recklessly. Allie is on her way home in her Volvo, distraught by her conversation earlier, and just as she's about to answer her cell phone, she strikes an animal, causing her to lose control of her vehicle and colliding into Vince's Mercedes, sending it over an embankment. Freaked out, Allie gets out of her vehicle to check on the person she hit, and flags down an approaching truck, which happens to be driven by Jimmy. Jimmy stops, and Ellie asks him to get her cell phone and call the police as she goes down to check on the wrecked vehicle. She makes her way down to find the still drunk Vince unharmed from the accident. Vince wants to settle the matter privately and to avoid the police based on the fact that he was driving drunk. As the two talk by the wrecked car, they hear noises from the woods as something, an animal, circles them. Scared, the two start to make their way up the steep embankment and are met by Jimmy, who informs that the police are on their way. The drunken Vince stumbles and nearly falls back, but Jimmy catches him just before he falls. Suddenly, the beast appears, biting into Vince's shoulder and yanking him back. Jimmy, still holding onto Vince as this happens, is pulled down as well. The two roll and tumble back down the embankment. As they reach the bottom, the beast retreats back into the woods. Allie makes her way back down to check on the two, and just as the police arrive above, the beast lunges out from behind Allie, wounding her arm and knocking her down. Then charges towards Vince and Jimmy, also knocking them down and wounding Jimmy's chest as it flees into the woods beyond them. In the distance, a howl echoes through the air. Later, as the three have their wounds tended to, Jimmy talks to Detective Harzell and speaks of a giant wolf. Harzell instantly dismisses Jimmy's claims. Harzell approaches Ellie and Vince, asking them what it was that attacked them. Ellie claims that she didn't get a good look at it, and Vince claims the same, although it appears that he's holding back and choosing his words wisely. Vince's family's chauffeur, Toby, who's described later as one who fills the fatherly void to Vince, arrives with a limo to bring Vince home. Vince offers Ellie a ride. During the ride, Vince tries to make small talk, trying to get to know Ellie, but she's business as usual and is all about getting his insurance information. The following morning, the three notice some unusual changes. Ellie takes notice of some strange markings on her hand. Vince becomes freaked when he can hear the private conversation between his father and stepmother about how he's a disappointment from a great distance away. Jimmy is concerned that Zipper, his only friend, is frightened and won't come anywhere near him. It should be noted here that Jimmy's arc throughout the story remains the most intact aspect between the original and the final film, with the only difference being that in this script, he lives with his single father who verbally abuses him and smacks him around a couple of times. But everything else, ranging from his interactions with bully Bo, his growing confidence as he tries to get closer to Brooke, the wrestling confrontation, infecting Zipper with the curse, and the reveal that Bo is actually gay and tries to make a move on him, that's all still here. Oddly, while Ellie and Vince have several interactions together throughout, Jimmy's story is separate and the three don't come together until the third act. Back on Ellie and Vince, while at work, Ellie catches a whiff of something that smells appealing to her, and as she nears the employee break room, she discovers that it was a colleague's nosebleed. She then gets a call from Vince, who asks her if she's experiencing anything strange since the previous night, and then proposes that they meet later to talk. She informs him that she has a business meeting later, but he's persuasive. She then arranges for her meeting to be moved to the specific bar that Vince wants to meet her at. At the bar, Vince waits patiently for Ellie and bumps into Becky, whom he struck out with the night before. But now he remembers her name, so she hangs around. Being a self-proclaimed starfucker and taking notice of actor Scott Baio, Becky decides to interrupt Scott's meeting with Ellie. Scott is already agitated by the news from Ellie that he will be appearing on the late-night show Third, following Ashton Kutcher and Carrot Top, and Becky's interruption only fuels his frustrations. Vince shows up trying to get Becky away from Ellie's meeting, but Vince and Scott get into an altercation in which Scott shoves Vince, and Vince, on primal instinct, punches Scott. Before Scott could strike back, the fight is broken up by his assistant Joni. Not impressed by Vince, Ellie runs off chasing after Scott and Joni, hoping to make things right. Joni demands that Scott goes on the show second. Later, Vince and Becky walk around the Santa Monica Pier. They see a fortune teller named Zila and go get their palms read. Upon reading Vince's, Zila informs him that he's marked by the curse of the beast. Shaken up by this discussion, Vince suddenly leaves. While on the pier, his body suddenly begins to convulse and spasm, and he falls backwards off the pier. But just before reaching the ground, his body twists in the air and he lands on all fours while letting out a growl. At the same time as this happens, Ellie also convulses as she unlocks the door to her apartment. And similarly, Jimmy does the same while researching werewolves in his bedroom. Meanwhile, Becky searches for Vince along the pier, calling out his name, but is then savagely attacked and killed by a werewolf. The following morning, Ellie wakes up naked on the high-rise of a billboard. Vince wakes up naked in a jail cell, and Jimmy wakes up naked in the shrubs outside of his house. Like in the final cut, Ellie goes to work and has an episode in the bathroom stall after sucking the blood off Craig Kilborn's figure. After a colleague attempts to check on her, Ellie scratches her away as she begins to transform. Ellie fights it, but is scared of what's happening to her. As this happens, Jimmy takes on Bo and his two cronies in the school gym. At the Winston mansion, Vince's father confronts him regarding his night in jail. Vince doesn't want to have this fight with his father and tries to walk away, but his father grabs at him. Suddenly, Vince reacts with rage, picking up his father and throwing him through the glass patio door and out into the garden. Vince then leaps through the door, landing on his father and striking at him. He is pulled off by Toby, and Vince then asks his chauffeur to get him out of there. That night, as Ellie arrives at her place, she finds Vince waiting for her. Inside, she listens as Vince explains to her about the fortune teller, the peer, waking up in the cell and attacking his father. He then proves to her something is wrong by showing her that his shoulder is completely healed. She then checks her own wound, discovering that it had healed as well. As the two talk, they find themselves having urges towards each other. They then have sex. After having intercourse, they resume their discussions of reality and curses, and suddenly Ellie remembers that Jimmy was also wounded. By luck, she finds the right phone number and calls up Jimmy to ask him if he's experiencing anything strange since the other night. Jimmy lies and says that he's not, but Ellie knows that this is a lie and gives him her number. As in the final cut, Jimmy is chased around the house by the infected Zipper and runs outside to find Bo waiting for him. With Zipper raging and attempting to break through the door, Jimmy and Bo race for Bo's car just in time. Jimmy then decides it's time to call Ellie and tell her the truth. Back at Ellie's, her and Vince are watching the news when they learn that Becky has been killed. They then hear a mysterious sound coming from outside, and Vince goes out to investigate. At this time, Ellie gets the call from Jimmy and agrees to meet him. As she turns around, she's startled to see Kyle standing in her apartment. Vince tackles him and the two kick him out of the apartment. They then hear a howl from outside, and suddenly Kyle's dead body comes flying through the window. Ellie and Vince make a break for it as the beast gives chase. They race towards Toby and the limo and climb in, and Toby peels away. But the beast leaps onto the car and begins to tear away at the roof as it tries to get to Ellie and Vince. The beast then smashes through the windshields, slashing Toby's throat open, and then rips him out of the driver's seat and onto the road. As this happens, Toby's body hits the cruise control button and the limo keeps driving. Vince lunges forward to steer the vehicle as the beast continues to attack, further damaging the limo. They manage to fling the beast off the limo and lose it as they make their way to meet Jimmy. At the wax museum, Brooke is surprised to see Jimmy and Bo together and questions them. As the beat-up limo arrives, Jimmy approaches it as Brooke returns to work to close up for the night. Jimmy explains to Ellie and Vince that his dog has been infected, and also his theory that the werewolf is after them to finish what it started because there cannot be too many werewolves roaming around LA. Suddenly, they hear the howl as the beast approaches from Hollywood Boulevard. Ellie, Vince, and Jimmy race into the wax museum, urging Brooke to lock the gate. Looking to hide, Brooke leads Jimmy, Bo, Ellie, and Vince deep into the museum. But it's too late as the beast is already inside. The beast attacks, slashing away at Vince's chest as the others make a run for it. Eventually, Ellie goes back to look for Vince, while Jimmy tries to lead Brooke and Bo to the exit. Jimmy runs into Vince, but Vince has begun to change and is no longer his normal self, growling and lunging at them. Vince then leaps away from them. Back on Ellie, we finally get the big reveal. The werewolf that attacked the three 2 nights ago is none other than Scott Baio. It turns out that Scott was attacked and turned while in Europe, and that his assistant, Joni, is the alpha werewolf that turned him, as opposed to in the final cut, in which Joni was turned into a werewolf after having unprotected sex with Joshua Jackson's character, Jake. However, Scott can't bring himself to finish the job and make his first kill, leaving Joni to clean up his mess as she's been doing for the last few nights. First with Jenny, then Becky, and now the 3 that he let live on Mulholland Drive. Ellie makes a run for it as a frustrated Joni then knocks Scott unconscious. Having successfully gotten Brooke and Bo out of the building, Jimmy heads back to find Ellie and help bring an end to their curse. Jimmy and Ellie run into each other, and Ellie asks him if he's seen Vince. Jimmy informs her that he's not on our side anymore, and then Vince attacks them, knocking Jimmy down, grabbing Ellie by the throat. Joni catches up and offers Ellie a chance to give in and be part of the pack, but Ellie refuses. Jimmy then begins to transform as Vince has, and Joni orders the 2 guys to kill Ellie, but instead, they lock eyes and suddenly attack Joni. Ellie then begins to transform and joins in the fight, but Joni's too strong and fights them off. The 3 fight the beasts lurking within themselves and revert back to their human forms as they try to flee from Joni, who is momentarily distracted by a group of animal control officers who swarm the building. After causing the officers to flee, Joni catches up to the 3, once again attacking, but Ellie finds a prop sword and decapitates Joni, releasing the three from the curse. The three that started off as losers end up winners, with Jimmy hooking up with Brooke and becoming friends with Bo, and Vince and Ellie end up together. Now I'm going to read the final thoughts that Miller put at the end of this article, as I really do agree with his thoughts. So to quote, "Ultimately, I think this is a better version of the story, and I don't understand why it was changed as it was. I don't understand why Bob Weinstein shut down production to retool the movie when it was so close to completion, and I don't understand why they felt that the product they settled on was better than the version they set out to make. While I still don't think this would have been one of my top favorite werewolf movies of all time, I don't think that this would have lived on to the promise that it was going to reinvent the genre. I found this draft to be much more satisfying as a whole. I don't mind the final cut of the movie. It does have its fun moments, but this is the version I really would like to see. There are missed opportunities and things I wanted them to do differently here, but it was still fun, an interesting read, and showed a lot of promise." So these are some of my final thoughts on the film. Let's ask ourselves a few questions. After all the hell the production team went through, was it worth all the trouble? Did Cursed reinvent the werewolf genre? Is this a hidden Wes Craven gem? First, let's address the second question. Bluntly, no, this film did not reinvent the werewolf genre. Wes Craven was trying to bring the subgenre of the werewolf to the post-Scream world. After finding out what the original shooting script was, I'm still not 100% sure that this would have reinvented anything, but this could have been a more well-known and loved film. The idea of three strangers coming together to confront the curse laid upon them by a puppet master-esque antagonist makes for a more cohesive story rather than one of a jealous one-night stand. Second, is it a hidden gem? I would say, if you like the campiness of the finished film and some of the over-the-top comedy, then this might be a movie for you. There are a few scenes that slow down the pace that could have worked if not for all the rewrites and reshoots. Those are most likely holdovers from the salvaged scenes of the original shoot and can explain some of the inconsistencies. So, was this film worth all the trouble of producing? Yes and no. The no is that we get a movie that doesn't know if it wants to be a callback to gothic horror brought to the late century or a meta-horror comedy that comments on the werewolf genre. I will say the yes, for all its troubled history, shows us a capsule of the years that this film was made. A time in Hollywood that was ruled over by the real-life monsters, the Weinstein brothers. This was the third time Craven and Williamson would collaborate, as their first two films together are considered horror gold. And beyond just a snapshot of time, the film is still fun, and everyone put all they had into this movie. Seeing a werewolf get mad and flip off the main character is hilarious. This movie has reached a cult classic level of devotion from fans, going so far as to start a hashtag release the Craven cut, in hopes to get the original cut or maybe something like a director's cut, kind of like the Justice League. Honestly, just to see more footage and behind the scenes of what was shot as part of a bonus on a new Blu-ray release would be awesome. I truly love this movie, for all its faults and camp. Would I call this the best werewolf movie of all time? Hell no. That's American Werewolf in London. Is this an entertaining film? Hell yeah. As soon as the collector's edition was released by Scream Factory, I bought it. Curse is just its name. A cursed film that was doomed to fail, but I will always love it. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Out from the Horrorbox. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe so you will get every new episode downloaded. As I said in other episodes, the more people who listen and subscribe, the more episodes I will be able to put out into the world. So if you enjoy us, spread the word. You have any suggestions for reviews, content, or you want us to read your scary stories, fact or fiction? You can email us at horrorboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can message us on Twitter at horrorboxpod, or on Instagram at horrorboxpodcast. Also, this Halloween we will be releasing an episode with just scary stories, and we want your personal paranormal and supernatural stories. Ghosts, aliens, cryptids, etc. Send them all. We'll see you next episode to discover what comes out from the horror box.